It was a peaceful day in the city. The streets were busy with people going about their daily lives, their faces filled with smiles. Children played in the parks, and adults chatted as they moved through the market. The sun shone brightly in the sky, casting a warm glow over the entire city. Life felt perfect. But no one knew that in a moment, everything would change. At the edge of the city, in a small, quiet neighborhood, a young child named Leo was playing. Leo was just 6 years old, with bright eyes and a smile that could light up any room. He loved playing with his toys in the park, pretending to be a hero, saving the world. Little did he know that this innocent play would be the last peaceful moment of his life. Leo was running around the park, laughing, when suddenly a loud, strange noise filled the air. The ground shook beneath his feet. At first, Leo thought it was just a plane flying overhead, but the noise grew louder and more terrifying. He looked up at the sky, his heart racing with confusion. And then he saw it. A dark, massive shape appeared, cutting through the clouds like a shadow. The shape was unlike anything Leo had ever seen before. It was not a plane, nor was it any kind of spacecraft he had ever heard of. It was large, with dark, metallic surfaces that gleamed in the sunlight. It was a ship, but it was alien, its design completely foreign to anything on Earth. As it descended toward the city, people began to scream and run, panic spreading like wildfire. Leo's small hands trembled as he stood frozen in place. He had never seen anything like this before, and the fear that gripped him made it hard to breathe. He didn't understand what was happening. He didn't know what was coming. The ship landed with a loud crash, shaking the ground. Dust and debris flew into the air, and the sound of metal scraping against the earth filled the air. The crowd of people that had gathered outside the park turned and fled, some of them falling over in their haste to escape. But Leo couldn't move. His small feet were rooted to the ground. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears, faster and faster, like a drumbeat of doom. From the open door of the ship, strange creatures stepped out. They were tall, their skin a pale, sickly color. Their eyes glowed a bright, unnatural yellow, and they wore strange, dark armor. Their presence was cold, their movements calculated and precise. They walked toward the frightened crowd without any signs of hesitation. Leo watched, his eyes wide with terror. He didn't understand what was happening, but he could feel something deep inside him, telling him that these creatures were not here to help. They were here for something else, something dangerous. The creatures moved quickly, and before anyone could react, they began to hurt people. With strange weapons, they struck down anyone who tried to fight back. Their strength was far greater than anything a human could resist. People screamed, but their cries were drowned out by the deafening sound of the weapons. Leo watched as one of the creatures raised its hand, and a bright flash of light shot out, striking down a man who had been running toward him. The man fell to the ground, motionless. The creature turned its attention to Leo, its glowing yellow eyes locking onto the child. Leo's heart skipped a beat as the creature began to move toward him. He was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or even scream. Before the creature could reach him, something incredible happened. The sky seemed to tear open, and a second ship appeared. This ship was different. It was larger, more advanced. It was human-made. Earth's military forces had arrived. The soldiers from the ship began to fire at the alien invaders. Explosions rang out as the two forces clashed. The aliens fought back with deadly precision, but the humans, though overwhelmed, refused to give up. For a brief moment, hope flickered in the eyes of the people, but the aliens were too powerful. They overpowered the humans with ease, forcing them to retreat. The creatures continued their attack, but their focus shifted. They stopped chasing the fleeing humans and turned toward Leo once more. Leo could feel their eyes on him, burning into his soul. It was then that he realized they weren't interested in just killing people. They were here for something specific. And that something was him. As one of the creatures reached out, Leo closed his eyes, waiting for the end. But before it could touch him, a voice shouted from behind. A figure, dressed in dark armor, stood tall, a weapon in hand. The figure fired a blast of energy at the alien, knocking it back. The creature hissed in pain but recovered quickly. It turned its attention to the newcomer, ready to strike. Leo was now caught between the aliens, the soldiers, and the confusion of battle. In the chaos, the unthinkable happened. The alien raised its weapon and fired. The shot didn't miss. It hit Leo. The child's small body crumpled to the ground. His innocent eyes went wide with pain, then closed forever. The world fell silent. For a moment, everything stopped. Even the soldiers seemed frozen in place, unable to comprehend the loss. The city, the people, the soldiers, all of them, broken by the loss of a single child. The alien creatures, having completed their task, retreated back into their ship and flew off into the sky. The battle was over, but the cost was more than anyone could bear. Humanity had just lost everything. But the question remained, why had they done it? Why had they targeted the child? The tragedy had only just begun. The days following the tragedy were filled with grief and anger. The news of Leo's death spread across the world like wildfire. People gathered in mourning, in shock, and in disbelief. A child, innocent and pure, had been taken from them without warning. But amid the sorrow, something powerful began to stir within humanity, a fire that had been kindling quietly for years, but now it was blazing out of control. The world had always been divided, each nation looking after its own interests, its own borders. But now, for the first time in history, humanity united in a single cause: revenge. The death of a child, an innocent life taken without reason, had awakened something deep inside every human being. The planet, so often fractured by politics and war, found a common enemy. An alien race had dared to harm them, and humanity would not stand for it. The world's leaders gathered in an emergency summit. Thousands of people from every corner of the earth watched on television as their leaders spoke of justice, of retaliation. In moments of deep pain and loss, unity was forged. General Morgan, a high-ranking officer in Earth's defense forces, stood before the world's leaders. His voice was steady, but it carried the weight of grief. "We will not let this stand," he said, his voice filled with authority. "The alien invaders who killed our child, our brother, our sister, they will pay for their actions. No one harms a human being and gets away with it. Not anymore." The room was filled with murmurs of agreement. No one spoke against him. The silence was deafening, filled with the sound of shared resolve. In the days that followed, Earth's governments coordinated their response. A global military alliance was formed, pooling together the greatest minds and forces from every nation. The best scientists were put to work, analyzing the wreckage left behind by the alien ship, trying to reverse engineer their technology. The best soldiers were recruited into an elite task force, training relentlessly for a war that they didn't fully understand yet, but knew they had to fight. Every city, every country, every person had a role to play. The streets, once filled with mourning, were now filled with hope, anger, and purpose. People who had never been involved in politics or war now found themselves part of the largest military effort the world had ever seen. The war, however, would not be won simply by numbers. The aliens who had invaded Earth were no ordinary foes. The human forces learned quickly that they were dealing with a highly advanced enemy, one with technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. The weapons the aliens had used on Leo were unlike anything found in Earth's arsenal. It wasn't just the firepower. It was the precision, the cold, calculating way they attacked. These creatures weren't just invaders. They were predators, and humanity was their prey. General Morgan and his team of strategists pored over every detail. They studied the aliens' technology, hoping to uncover a weakness. Every day, the hope for revenge grew stronger. But so did the fear. Would humanity's forces be enough to face the might of an alien empire? At the same time, all over the world, the memory of Leo's death lingered in the hearts of every person. People talked of the child's life, of how he had been like any other child, full of dreams, laughter, and hope. That hope had been destroyed by beings who did not care for life, who saw the young as nothing more than tools to further their goals. And so, as Earth's military forces prepared, so did the rest of humanity. There were protests, speeches, and marches in every major city. The streets were filled with signs that read, "Justice for Leo. We are not prey," and "Make them pay." It was not just a war of soldiers now. It was a war of the people. Every single human, from the youngest to the oldest, was part of the struggle, and the cry for revenge echoed in every corner of the Earth. A few days later, an unexpected message came through Earth's communications network. It was broadcast to every television, radio, and digital device on the planet. The voice was cold and metallic, a strange, unrecognizable language speaking first, before an automated translator began speaking in English. "You will regret this," the voice said, a warning that sent chills down the spine of anyone who heard it. "You are weak. You are nothing compared to us. Do not think you can challenge us. You will be wiped from the stars." The message cut off as suddenly as it had come, leaving a silence in its wake. But it was not a silence of fear. It was a silence filled with anger. Humanity had been warned, and now they knew what they were up against. General Morgan stood before a large map, his finger tracing the alien route that had been discovered. The alien ship had originated from a distant star system, one that was beyond the reach of current human exploration. But that didn't matter. Humanity was done waiting. The time for action was now. The plan was clear. A multi-pronged assault was set into motion. Humanity's forces would strike at the heart of the alien empire, no matter the cost. Earth's best fleets were being readied, and every available soldier was being trained. It was a race against time. Could they prepare in time for the inevitable counterattack? In every corner of the world, people were readying themselves for war. Parents hugged their children just a little tighter. Soldiers laced up their boots with determination, and engineers worked day and night to develop weapons that could challenge the invaders. Revenge had become more than just a word. It was a promise to the child who had been taken, a promise to every person who had been hurt, and it was a promise that would soon be put to the test. The time to strike back had arrived. The moment the global military alliance was formed, humanity's response became a machine of relentless purpose. No one had time to mourn anymore. There was only one goal now: find the alien invaders and make them pay. The warriors, the scientists, the engineers, all worked together, driven by the memory of the child's tragic death. General Morgan stood in the command center, surrounded by maps and holographic displays of the alien ship's trajectory. The alien invaders had come from a distant star system, one that was beyond the reach of Earth's normal military patrols. But that didn't matter anymore. Earth's fleet was preparing for an all-out offensive. "Prepare the fleets," Morgan commanded, his voice sharp with determination. "We will find them, no matter where they hide, no matter how far they run." The human forces had spent the past few days analyzing every scrap of data they could find from the wreckage left behind by the alien ship. Every detail was important. The technology was unfamiliar, almost magical in its design. But humanity was nothing if not adaptable. The brightest minds had been working nonstop to reverse engineer the alien technology, to understand how their weapons worked, how their ships flew. And slowly, step by step, humanity started to catch up. While Earth's military forces geared up, a different kind of war was being fought in the minds of the world's scientists. They had to build weapons capable of standing up to alien technology. Laser-based weapons, energy shields, and even gravity manipulation tech were being tested. Every failed attempt only fueled their desire for success. They were learning, adjusting, improving. Meanwhile, humanity's fleet began to assemble. Ships of every size, from the largest battleships to small reconnaissance crafts, were getting ready for the journey to the stars. The global military alliance had pooled all their resources together, uniting the most advanced technology from every nation. The combined power of Earth was now a force to be reckoned with. It was humanity's first true chance to strike back, and they were ready. But as the preparations took shape, an unsettling thought lingered in the minds of Earth's leaders. The aliens were not just invaders. They were predators. And predators, unlike invaders, didn't just strike without reason. They hunted, and their hunt wasn't over. General Morgan was sitting in the command center, staring at the massive holographic map before him. The map displayed not only the alien homeworld, but also the path the ship had taken to Earth. The trajectory was clear. The invaders had planned their attack carefully, selecting the most vulnerable point on Earth to make their move. "They're not random," Morgan muttered to himself. "They chose Earth. And they knew what they were doing." The silence in the room was heavy. His staff exchanged looks, all realizing the same thing. The alien invaders were not just looking to conquer, they were testing humanity. They had picked Earth as their target because they knew it would be a challenge. They were watching, and if Earth's forces were not strong enough, they would return for the next attack. Humanity had to show them that they were not to be underestimated. One by one, the ships began to launch from Earth's spaceports. Thousands of soldiers, scientists, and engineers all boarded their crafts, their faces grim, determined. The world had made its choice. There was no turning back now. As the ships left Earth's atmosphere, leaving behind the blue planet that had been home to so many, they moved toward the unknown. The journey would take weeks, perhaps months, but there was no time to waste. The alien homeworld was far away, hidden in the depths of the galaxy, but humanity would find it. Among the fleet was a young lieutenant named Sarah, just a few years older than Leo, the child who had sparked this entire mission. She sat in the cockpit of her fighter ship, her fingers brushing against the controls. Like everyone else, she had joined the military not just to protect Earth, but to avenge the death of an innocent child. She had been part of the first wave of soldiers to respond to the alien attack, but the battle had been chaos. The aliens had struck so quickly, so ruthlessly, that they had overwhelmed the Earth's forces. Sarah had seen the horror with her own eyes. The child's body, the destruction, the bloodshed. As her ship rocketed through space, Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, her thoughts going back to Leo. She remembered the news reports, the child's small, lifeless body, surrounded by debris, the look of pure innocence on his face, as if he hadn't yet realized what had happened. "We will make them pay," she whispered to herself, her voice soft but full of conviction. "We will make sure no child ever suffers like that again." Her ship, along with dozens of others, traveled deeper into the unknown, the stars stretching out before them. Sarah wasn't just fighting for revenge. She was fighting for justice, for every innocent life that had been taken, for every person who had lost someone they loved. Weeks passed, and the fleet grew closer to the alien star system. They faced challenges along the way, hostile cosmic phenomena, energy storms that threatened to tear their ships apart, and even the fear of what awaited them at their destination. But the fleet pressed on, driven by the promise of revenge. The crew knew what was at stake. They could not afford to fail. Finally, the fleet arrived at the edge of the alien star system. It was vast, far beyond what Earth's technology could comprehend. And yet, in the distance, they spotted it, the alien homeworld. The alien world was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. The surface was covered with dark, metallic structures, glowing with a strange, unnatural light. It looked like a place of power, a place where the predators ruled. General Morgan's voice crackled through the communication system. "This is it. The enemy is here. We strike now. Show them no mercy. For Leo, for every life they took." The hunt was about to begin. The silence that hung in space was deafening. The fleet of humanity's ships hovered just beyond the edge of the alien system, poised to strike. Every soldier aboard, every officer, every engineer, All were ready for this moment. Their hearts beat as one, a single force of vengeance and justice, ready to challenge the unknown and strike back at the invaders who had taken so much from them. General Morgan stood at the command center aboard the flagship, his eyes fixed on the view screen. The alien homeworld loomed ahead, a cold, menacing sight. It was surrounded by dark ships, vast, sleek, and threatening. Earth's fleet was smaller, but it had something the alien forces did not: the burning desire for retribution. The alien invaders had underestimated humanity. Now, they would feel the weight of that mistake. All ships, prepare for launch. Morgan's voice echoed through the fleet's communication system. We attack at full force. No retreat. No surrender. The fleet surged forward, engines roaring to life as humanity's ships pushed into the dark expanse of space. It wasn't just a war. They were carrying the collective anger of an entire world with them. Every soul that had lost a loved one, every person who had seen the horrors of that tragic day, now had a chance to make their voice heard in the most powerful way possible. As they approached the alien planet, the first wave of fighters broke off from the main fleet. Lieutenant Sarah, in her small fighter ship, was one of the first to launch into the battle. Her pulse was quick, her thoughts focused solely on the mission at hand. She wasn't just flying for herself or for her planet. She was flying for Leo, the child who had never had the chance to grow, who had never seen his dreams fulfilled. Lieutenant Sarah, came the voice of the squadron commander through the comms. We need to establish a perimeter around the planet and draw their forces out. Prepare to engage. Sarah's fingers tightened around the controls. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She was ready. The fighter ships shot into the alien system with precision, dodging energy blasts from the enemy. The aliens had prepared for this assault, sending their own wave of smaller ships to meet the human forces head-on. But humanity was faster, more agile. They knew the stakes, and they fought with everything they had. The first battle was a chaotic frenzy. Laser beams crisscrossed the vastness of space, cutting through the darkness like lightning. Explosions rocked the void as fighter ships collided with alien crafts, each side giving as good as they got. The human forces used their superior maneuverability to their advantage, dancing through the incoming fire with precision. But the aliens, despite being slightly slower, were not easily defeated. Their ships were heavily armored, and their weapons were deadly accurate. Sarah's ship streaked through the battlefield, her heart pounding as she took down an alien fighter with a direct shot to the engine. The enemy ship exploded in a burst of fire, but Sarah didn't have time to watch it fall. She had more to do. One down. Keep pushing forward, she shouted to her squadron, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. But then, as they pushed deeper into the enemy fleet, the alien ships began to regroup. More of them, larger and more powerful, emerged from the dark shadows of the planet. This was no longer just a skirmish. It was a full-scale invasion, and the odds were quickly stacking against humanity. On the flagship, General Morgan's voice crackled through the comms. All units, break off. We need to form a defensive line around the planet. Reinforcements are on the way, but we have to hold our ground. The human fleet had planned for this eventuality. They had known that the alien forces would respond in overwhelming numbers, but they weren't prepared for the sheer scale of what they faced. As the human forces adjusted their tactics and tried to regroup, the alien forces launched their counterattack. Massive capital ships, their hulls shimmering with dark energy, moved toward the human fleet. Their weapons were unlike anything the Earth forces had ever encountered. Blasts of concentrated energy filled the void, cutting through human ships as though they were nothing more than paper. A massive explosion rocked Sarah's ship, sending it spiraling out of control. Alarms blared as her ship was damaged, but Sarah gritted her teeth and fought to regain control. She could hear the voice of her commander over the comms. Sarah, get back in formation. We need you. But before Sarah could respond, another ship appeared in her line of sight. It was a massive alien warship, looming like a shadow of death. It fired its weapons with brutal force, and Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she realized the sheer power of the weaponry they were facing. The first shot hit. Her ship shuddered, and a sudden wave of pain shot through her body as the ship's systems began to fail. The second shot came, and Sarah's vision blurred as everything around her started to spin. She slammed her hands on the controls, willing her ship to roll together. She couldn't afford to die. Not here. Not now. With a desperate cry, she pulled hard on the throttle, pushing the ship into a wild, evasive maneuver. The alien warship fired again, but this time, Sarah managed to narrowly avoid the blast. The sheer force of her last move sent her spiraling toward the alien capital ship, but she didn't care. She was locked on target. Locking on. Targeting. Fire. Sarah shouted into the comms, even as the battle raged around her. Her ship's cannons fired a full barrage of energy blasts, and the alien ship took a direct hit. The massive vessel shuddered, its shields weakening, and Sarah's heart leaped in triumph. But before she could fire again, a larger blast from a different enemy ship rocked her fighter, sending it spinning out of control. The view of the alien homeworld flickered before her as her ship spiraled. Her world went dark. Back on the flagship, General Morgan saw the reports flash across his screens. Sarah's ship had been lost. She wasn't alone. Many had fallen. But that didn't stop the fight. It only fueled the fire. "This isn't over," Morgan said through clenched teeth. "We will win. For them. For Leo." The battle was far from won. But humanity had proven one thing. No force in the galaxy could crush their spirit. They had just begun to fight. The battle raged on, a storm of fire and destruction that consumed the stars themselves. Humanity's fleet, battered and scarred, continued to press forward, refusing to retreat, refusing to surrender. The pain of loss had only hardened their resolve. For every ship that fell, for every soldier that was lost, there was one burning question in the minds of every human in the fleet. How far were they willing to go to avenge the innocent lives taken by the alien invaders? General Morgan stood at the command center, his face etched with the pain of the countless losses they had suffered. His eyes flicked across the screens, watching the strategy unfold. Humanity's forces were holding their own, but they were running out of time. The alien forces were relentless, their ships far superior in size and firepower. But humanity had something the aliens had underestimated, a will to fight that could not be extinguished. "Report," Morgan barked to his tactical officer, his voice tight with tension. "Sir, we've lost 2/3 of our fleet. The remaining ships are scattered and damaged. The alien fleet is forming up for a final assault." Morgan's jaw tightened. How many more can we lose? How much more can we endure? The officer paused, her eyes scanning the reports before her. "Sir, we're at the edge. We can't keep going at this rate." A chill filled the room. The situation was dire, but General Morgan knew one thing. There was no turning back now. This was the moment. This was their one chance at revenge, at justice. "Do we have any more reserves?" he asked, his mind working quickly. "We've called in every ship we have, sir. The last of our reinforcements are en route, but they'll take another few hours to reach us." Morgan's gaze turned to the view screen, where the alien homeworld loomed, a dark, oppressive mass that seemed to mock them from the void. He thought of Sarah, of the brave soldiers who had fought and fallen. He thought of Leo, the child whose death had started this war, whose memory burned brightly in their hearts. "We won't make it another few hours," Morgan said. "It's now or never." The battle had reached its peak. The alien forces, recognizing the human determination, were preparing for their final strike. They would crush humanity's forces in one swift blow. But they hadn't anticipated one thing: humanity's willingness to fight, even when the odds were impossible. Humanity's remaining fleet, though severely depleted, gathered together in a desperate final formation. Every pilot, every crew member knew that they were fighting for the last hope of their world. They would make their stand here, in the shadow of the alien homeworld, and they would either destroy their enemies or perish in the attempt. Sarah's squadron, though many had fallen, had one remaining fighter left. The young lieutenant had been unconscious for hours, her ship drifting among the stars. But when the alarms rang out, when the call to action came, she jolted awake. Her vision was blurry, her body aching, but the fire in her heart burned brighter than ever. The alien invaders had taken her comrades, her friends, her home, and they had killed a child who never had the chance to live. No more. "Lieutenant Sarah, you're cleared for launch," came the voice of the commander, a familiar voice. "We need you. We need everyone." Sarah's hand shook as she gripped the controls. The ship's damaged systems flickered to life, her mind going into overdrive. This was it, her last chance to make a difference, her final chance to honor her fallen comrades. "I'm coming," she whispered to herself, pushing her fighter into full throttle. She had nothing left to lose, but everything to fight for. As she flew through the debris of the battlefield, Sarah locked eyes with the alien ships ahead. The alien fleet was massive, a sea of cold mechanical power. But Sarah wasn't afraid. She had seen the destruction they could cause. She had witnessed it firsthand. But she had also seen something else, something the aliens could never understand. Humanity's spirit. The remaining fleet of humanity, outnumbered and outgunned, launched their final assault. Every ship fought with a ferocity born from the deepest pain, every laser shot, every missile launched, a silent promise to the fallen. General Morgan, from the flagship, watched as the final wave of humanity's fleet charged toward the alien capital ship. They would either succeed or be destroyed, but there was no turning back. "Engage everything," Morgan ordered, his voice steady despite the pressure. "All fighters, all weapons, everything we have. We fight to the end." The two forces collided in a violent explosion of light and sound. The alien capital ships fired massive energy blasts, tearing through human ships with brutal precision. But the human fleet, undeterred, fought back with everything they had. Sarah's ship flew low, weaving through the chaos. The massive alien warship ahead of her was the target. She had one shot, one chance to make it count. "Lock on. Targeting. Ready to fire," she shouted, her hands trembling as she lined up her shot. The alien ship's shields flickered, but they weren't enough. Sarah had studied their weaknesses, had learned the patterns of the enemy. This was it. She pressed the trigger, and her ship fired a concentrated energy blast that tore through the alien shields and struck the heart of the capital ship. A brilliant explosion lit up the sky as the alien ship erupted in flames. But Sarah's victory was short-lived. In the chaos of the battle, another alien ship targeted her fighter. The blast hit with devastating force, sending her ship spiraling toward the dark expanse of space. "Sarah." "No." The commander's voice crackled through the comms, but it was too late. The flagship, with General Morgan at the helm, watched as the last remnants of humanity's fleet fought valiantly against the alien forces. With every ship that fell, they drew closer to the ultimate goal. And in that moment, as the smoke of battle cleared, one truth remained. Humanity had faced impossible odds, had lost so much, but they had done what they promised. They had avenged the innocent. The alien fleet was broken. Their capital ship was gone. And the cost had been high, but the message had been sent. No one would ever harm humanity again. The war for vengeance had been won. As the remnants of humanity's fleet drifted back toward Earth, there was a bitter taste of victory. The galaxy had learned the price of underestimating humanity. The cost had been steep, but the lesson would echo forever. No one would harm a human being again, not while they still breathed. The silence after the battle was overwhelming. The wreckage of the once mighty alien fleet floated like a graveyard in the cold expanse of space. Humanity's forces, though victorious, had paid an unimaginable price. Their ships were battered, their crews worn, and their hearts heavy with the weight of loss. But despite everything, they had accomplished the impossible. General Morgan stood at the observation window of the flagship, staring out at the wreckage. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture rigid. He had led his people through the flames of war, but now that the battle was won, he didn't feel like a hero. There were no cheers, no celebrations, only the eerie quiet of space and the bitter taste of victory that came at such a high cost. "General," came the voice of his second-in-command, Lieutenant Ashford, "we've received word from Earth. The planet's been informed of the victory." Morgan nodded slowly, but there was no joy in his expression. "What did they say?" "Only that the war is over," Ashford replied quietly. "They're asking us to return home." The words hit Morgan like a physical blow. Home. It felt like a lifetime since they had left, since the moment the aliens had first struck. So much had changed. So many had died. What would they be returning to? Was Earth still the place of hope and peace they had once known, or had it too been changed forever by the horrors of war? "Do they know about the losses?" Morgan asked, his voice betraying a flicker of exhaustion. "Yes, sir. They know," Ashford replied. "But they want us to come back. They'd want to rebuild." Rebuilding. The word echoed in Morgan's mind. It felt like a cruel joke. Rebuild what? The scars of this war would never heal completely. The pain would always remain. "Prepare the fleet to return to Earth," Morgan said finally, his voice steady. "Let's go home." The journey back to Earth took days, and during that time, the survivors tried to find some semblance of normalcy. But the memory of the war, of the lives lost, was never far from their thoughts. The crew of the flagship spent their time in silence, each person reflecting on what they had sacrificed, what they had lost. Sarah, the brave lieutenant who had led the final charge, was gone, along with so many others. Her squadron had fought heroically, but they too had paid the ultimate price. There would be no more stories of Sarah's bravery, no more laughter shared in the halls of the ship. She was a name on a memorial, a symbol of the courage that had fueled their victory. General Morgan spent his time in his quarters, staring at the wall, lost in thought. He thought of Leo, the child whose tragic death had sparked this entire war. He thought of the parents, the families, the countless innocent lives taken by the alien invaders. What had they died for? Was it worth it? But then, in the quiet of his room, a new thought began to take shape. Yes, it was worth it. The victory wasn't just for those who had fallen. It was for those who had lived. The children, the families, the future. Humanity had not only fought to survive, but they had fought for something more. They had fought to ensure that no one would ever face the horrors of that day again. As the fleet finally entered Earth's orbit, General Morgan stood at the helm of his ship once more, his eyes fixed on the planet below. Earth, home. It was scared, battered, but it was still there. The blue planet that had birthed all of humanity's hopes and dreams. "We've come home," Morgan said softly, as the crew gathered around him. "And we will rebuild. For them. For everyone we lost." The command center was silent, but the faces of the men and women around him were filled with something new. Hope. The war had been long, and the cost had been high, but they had won. And now, they would honor the fallen by rebuilding a future. Humanity had faced destruction, had faced the unimaginable, and had fought with everything they had. And now, they stood on the brink of a new beginning. The ship descended toward Earth's atmosphere, and as it broke through the clouds, a new dawn greeted them. The sunlight streamed down, bathing the planet in a warm glow. It was the first true sunrise in years, the first real sign that the darkness of war was finally over. But as the ship made its descent, there was no cheering, no applause. There was only the solemn promise of a new chapter. The cost of this war would never be forgotten, but from the ashes of destruction, humanity would rise again. And as they touched down on the surface of Earth, the survivors stood together, united in their grief and their triumph. They had paid the price of vengeance, and now it was time to rebuild, time to honor the fallen and ensure that the future would never again be threatened. The war was over, But the journey of rebuilding had just begun, and humanity would never forget the cost of their victory. The people of Earth watched as the ships returned, their hearts filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. They had heard the news, but seeing the return of the fleet was another thing entirely. The survivors, those few who had made it back, were the living embodiment of all the sacrifices made during the war. They would tell the stories of those who had given everything. They would remember the fallen. And together, they would forge a new world, one built on the foundation of the courage and strength shown by humanity in their darkest hour. For as long as the stars burned in the sky, humanity would remember, and they would never again allow their home to be threatened. This time, they would fight to protect the future, not with vengeance, but with the hope that their fallen loved ones had given them the strength to carry it forward. A new era was dawning, and humanity, though scared, was ready to rise from the ashes of war. Years had passed since the final battle, yet the scars of war were still etched deeply into the soul of humanity. The survivors had rebuilt Earth, but the memories of the conflict, the fallen, and the price of victory were still fresh. Humanity had reclaimed its home, but it would never be the same again. The war had changed everything, from the way people looked at the universe to the way they viewed themselves. General Morgan, now retired and older, stood in front of a memorial in the heart of the new capital. The names of those lost in the war were etched into the stone, a permanent reminder of the sacrifices made. The war had cost them everything, but it had given them something in return. Peace, for now, at least. Beside him stood Sarah's parents, the faces of grief and pride mixed in their eyes. Their daughter had given everything for the future, and though they were heartbroken, they knew it had not been in vain. As they stared at the memorial, the weight of loss hung over them like a shadow, but so did the sense of victory. "Do you think they're watching?" Sarah's mother asked quietly, her voice filled with sorrow and hope. "Do you think they know we made it?" Morgan's eyes softened as he placed a hand on her shoulder. "I believe they do," he said. "They gave us the strength to fight. They're always with us." Behind them, the reconstructed city sprawled out, a symbol of humanity's resilience. The streets were filled with people, many of them children who would grow up with no memory of the war. But the older generations would never forget. They would carry the weight of the past into the future, ensuring that the lessons learned in the fire of battle were never lost. The world was healing, slowly but surely. But it was not just Earth that had changed, it was humanity itself. The once divided nations had come together in the face of a common enemy. The war had united them in ways that nothing else could have. Now, as the planet's leaders gathered to discuss the future, it was clear that they had learned from the mistakes of the past. There would be no more wars for revenge. There would be no more destruction at the hands of the powerful. Humanity had come to understand one thing: the cost of vengeance was too great. The military, now a much smaller force, had been restructured, with a focus on defense rather than conquest. There were no more invasions, no more bloodshed. The galaxy beyond Earth remained unexplored, but humanity's desire to expand, to conquer, had been replaced by a desire to protect. They would never again let themselves be so vulnerable. General Morgan had become a symbol of that change. Once a warrior consumed by the thirst for revenge, he had now become a teacher, a mentor, a reminder that vengeance, while necessary at the time, was not a path to peace. He spent his days educating the younger generations about the cost of war, the value of life, and the importance of unity. Sarah's legacy had also lived on, not just in the stories told by her comrades, but in the very structure of their new world. She had been the embodiment of humanity's resilience, and in her memory, a new generation of warriors was being trained, not to fight out of hate, but to protect out of love for their world and their people. The stars, once seen as distant beacons of potential conflict, were now a source of wonder. Humanity had learned the hard way that the universe was vast and full of dangers, but it was also full of possibilities. The exploration of space had resumed, but this time, humanity went forth with caution. The lessons of the past were not easily forgotten. One day, a new fleet set out, the first since the war. General Morgan, now a mentor to the fleet's commanders, stood at the helm of the flagship, watching as the new generation of explorers prepared to leave. They weren't going out for conquest. They weren't looking for enemies. They were going to learn, to discover, to ensure that what had happened before never happened again. "You ready for this?" a young commander asked as he approached Morgan. Morgan looked out at the stars, a peaceful calm in his eyes. "I'm ready," he said. "The future is waiting for you, but remember this. It's not about fighting the enemy. It's about understanding it. It's about protecting what we have. And never, ever forget the cost of peace." The young commander nodded, absorbing the weight of Morgan's words. Humanity had been given a second chance, a new hope. They had learned the hard way, but they had learned nonetheless. As the fleet prepared to launch, Morgan watched one final time as the ships lifted off, disappearing into the vastness of space. A quiet sense of pride filled him. He had seen the horrors of war, had witnessed the destruction of his people. But now he saw the dawn of a new era, one where humanity would no longer be driven by revenge, but by a desire to protect and to understand. They would reach for the stars, but they would do so with wisdom and compassion. The legacy of vengeance had come to an end. Now, the legacy of peace would take its place. The stars above shone brightly, no longer a reminder of the war that had once consumed humanity, but a beacon of the new future they had forged from the ashes of destruction. The universe was still full of unknowns, but humanity had proven one thing beyond a doubt. They could survive, rebuild, and most importantly, they could learn. And they would never forget the price of their victory. It would live on in the hearts of every human, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, as a reminder that peace was worth fighting for, and that no price was too high for the future. Humanity had paid the price of vengeance. Now it was time to build a world of peace that no enemy could ever threaten again.